The year is 1945. World War II rages on with an intensity that has engulfed the entire globe. The world is in turmoil, and the fate of nations hangs in the balance. The once mighty Nazi Germany, which had once seemed invincible, now teeters on the brink of collapse. The streets of Berlin, once bustling with life, are now reduced to rubble and ash. Deep beneath the ruins of Berlin, in a subterranean bunker, hides the architect of this devastating conflict, Adolf Hitler. This bunker, a fortress of concrete and steel, is now his last refuge. His dreams of a 1,000-year Reich lay shattered, his armies in retreat, his enemies closing in from all sides. The once formidable Wehrmacht is now a shadow of its former self, retreating in disarray. This is the story of his demise, a tale shrouded in mystery and speculation. How did the man who once held Europe in his grip come to such an ignominious end? This is the search for what happened to Hitler's body. The world was left with questions, and the answers were buried deep within the ruins of Berlin. The world watched, breathless, as the Nazi regime crumbled. The Allied forces, having fought their way through Europe, now stood at the gates of Berlin, ready to deliver the final blow. Reports of Hitler's deteriorating mental and physical state filtered through the chaos. The once charismatic leader was now a broken man, his health failing him as the war turned against him. His grip on reality seemed to slip with each passing day. Paranoia and delusion took hold as he issued increasingly irrational orders to his dwindling forces. The Führer, who had once commanded millions, now found himself confined to a concrete tomb, a prisoner of his own making. The walls of his bunker, meant to protect him, now felt like a suffocating cage. The world waited with morbid fascination for the final act to play out. The end of Hitler was not just the end of a man, but the end of an era of unprecedented horror and destruction. As the Allies closed in, the fate of the Führer became a symbol of the fall of tyranny itself. The Führerbunker, a last-ditch effort to protect the Nazi elite, became a tomb of despair. Located beneath the Chancellery Gardens, it was a claustrophobic maze of concrete and steel. Within its confines, Hitler and his closest confidants, including his mistress Eva Braun, lived their final days. The air was thick with tension and fear. The constant bombardment by the advancing Soviet forces shook the bunker's foundations. Supplies dwindled. Hope, like the flickering lights powered by a failing generator, seemed to fade with each passing hour. The atmosphere within those walls was one of impending doom. As the situation grew more dire, many of Hitler's inner circle fled. Some sought to escape the advancing Red Army, others perhaps could no longer stomach the impending defeat. A select few remained, bound by loyalty, fear, or a combination of both. Among those who stayed were Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Propaganda, and his wife Magda. The Goebbels family, with their 6 young children, presented a chilling image of devotion taken to a terrifying extreme. They were willing to follow their Führer even into the abyss. On April 30th, 1945, with the thunder of Soviet artillery fire echoing overhead, Adolf Hitler made a final, fateful decision. He would end his own life rather than face capture and humiliation at the hands of his enemies. According to eyewitness accounts, Hitler and Eva Braun, who had married just the day before, secluded themselves in his private study. A single gunshot rang out. When Hitler's aides entered the room, they found the Führer slumped on the sofa, a pistol at his feet. Eva Braun lay beside him, dead from cyanide poisoning. The reign of the Nazi dictator was over. The fate of the remains, a hasty cremation? This question has puzzled historians and conspiracy theorists alike for decades. The final moments of Adolf Hitler's life and the subsequent handling of his body have been shrouded in mystery and speculation. The discovery of Hitler's body presented a dilemma for the remaining Nazi leadership. They were in a state of panic and disarray, knowing that the end was near. The Führer, their leader, was dead, and the Soviet forces were closing in rapidly. With Soviet forces closing in, there was little time for a proper burial. The city of Berlin was in ruins, and the chaos of war left no room for elaborate ceremonies. The Nazi officials had to act quickly to avoid the Soviets capturing Hitler's body. They feared the Soviets would desecrate the Führer's remains and turn them into a propaganda tool. The thought of Hitler's body being paraded around as a trophy was unbearable for the remaining Nazi leadership. They needed to ensure that his body would not fall into enemy hands. Accounts differ, but it seems the most likely scenario involved a hasty cremation. Some reports suggest the decision was made within hours of Hitler's death. The urgency of the situation left them with no other viable options. Gasoline was scarce, but they managed to scrounge enough to douse the bodies and set them ablaze in the Chancellery garden. The garden, once a symbol of power and prestige, now served as the final resting place for the Führer and his closest associates. The relentless shelling and chaos provided a grim cover for their actions. The sounds of explosions and the sight of burning buildings masked the smoke and flames from the cremation. It was a desperate act in desperate times. However, the speed and conditions of the cremation cast doubt on the completeness of the process. The hurried nature of the act, combined with the scarcity of resources, meant that the bodies were not fully reduced to ashes. This has led to ongoing debates and investigations into the true fate of Hitler's remains. Whispers and rumors escape in conspiracy. In the chaotic aftermath of the war, rumors swirled. Had Hitler truly died in the bunker, or had he escaped perhaps to South America to live out his days in hiding? Conspiracy theories flourished, fueled by the lack of definitive proof. Some whispered of secret escape routes, tunnels leading from the bunker to hidden aircraft waiting to whisk the Führer away. Others claimed he had made a deal with the Allies, trading secrets for safe passage. The lack of a verifiable body fueled these speculations. The mystery of Hitler's final moments became a breeding ground for intrigue. The skull fragment, a tantalizing clue. For years, the only physical evidence linked to Hitler's death remained in Soviet possession. A charred fragment of a skull, bearing a bullet hole, was supposedly recovered from the Chancellery garden. This, the Soviets claimed, was the proof of Hitler's suicide. However, access to this evidence was restricted, and doubts lingered. Was this truly a piece of Hitler's skull, or was it a carefully crafted fabrication, designed to solidify the Soviet narrative of Hitler's demise? The mystery deepened, leaving many to question the truth. DNA evidence. Unraveling the mystery. In 2009, researchers were finally granted access to the skull fragment. DNA analysis, a tool unavailable in 1945, offered a chance to solve the mystery once and for all. The results, however, only added another layer to the puzzle. The DNA did not match any existing samples from Hitler's known relatives. The skull fragment belonged to a woman. The Soviets' claim, it seemed, was false. This revelation reignited the debate. Had they deliberately misled the world? What had happened to Hitler's body? The truth, it appeared, remained buried. Conclusion: the truth buried by time. The search for what happened to Hitler's body is a journey into the heart of one of history's greatest mysteries. This quest has led historians, scientists, and conspiracy theorists alike down a labyrinth of clues, each more perplexing than the last. The end of World War II left Europe in ruins, and amidst this chaos, the fate of one of history's most infamous figures became shrouded in uncertainty. While the DNA analysis of the skull fragment debunked the Soviet narrative, it did little to provide definitive answers. The fragment, once thought to be Hitler's, turned out to belong to a woman, adding another layer of confusion to an already tangled web of theories. The Soviet Union's claim of possessing Hitler's remains was thus called into question, leaving historians to ponder what really happened in those final days. The most plausible explanation remains the hasty cremation in the Chancellery garden. Eyewitness accounts from those who were present in the Führerbunker suggest that Hitler and Eva Braun's bodies were burned to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. The garden, now a place of historical significance, was once the site of hurried and desperate actions as the Third Reich crumbled. The chaotic conditions, the lack of time, and the deliberate efforts to obfuscate the truth all point towards this conclusion. In the final days of the war, Berlin was a city under siege, and the Nazi leadership was in disarray. The urgency to destroy any trace of Hitler's body was paramount, driven by a desire to prevent it from becoming a trophy for the advancing Allied forces. However, without the discovery of further physical evidence, the complete story of Hitler's final moments and the ultimate fate of his remains may forever remain an enigma, a mystery lost to the ashes of war. The ruins of Europe hold many secrets, and among them, the truth about Hitler's demise is perhaps the most elusive. As time marches on, the fragments of history become harder to piece together, leaving us to wonder if we will ever truly know what happened in those final desperate hours.